Добрий вечір ще раз. Вітаємо вас в Gym Factory Art Center. Прошу вибачення за нашу затримку. Яннік, I think you will also need the headset for later, for questions. Ще раз вас вітаю. Сьогодні у нас відбувається подія в межах освітньої програми The Black Box «Театр між нами». Це освітня подія, присвячена перформативним мистецтвам, яку ми в Gym Factory Art Center реалізовуємо вже з 2019 року. Сьогодні нашим гостем, лектором є Яннік Нумен, нідерландський актор, театральний діяч, співавтор The 90s Production. І ця програма в цілому цього року присвячена темі того, як театр, театральні майданчики, перформативні мистецтва стають просторами, де формуються спільноти, де відбуваються зустрічі, де ми можемо використовувати цей простір і ці знаряддя як інструменти до пізнання інших, до діалогу, до створення нових зв'язків. І сьогодні я хочу теж подякувати Оксані Черкашиній, акторці, режисерці українській, яка сьогодні розпочала цю програму своїм воркшопом для в основному акторів і акторок. Завтра Яннік проведе також практичний воркшоп. І далі з цією програмою, з іншими подіями ми поїдемо ще в Одесу в наступному місяці і в вересні в Запоріжжя. І ми дуже вдячні нашим партнерам і тим, хто нас підтримують. Фінансову підтримку цього проєкту забезпечує програма House of Europe. Нашими хорошими друзями і партнерами тут є Посольство Королівства Нідерландів в Україні та Литовський культурний інститут, завдяки яким ми маємо можливість знаходити теж зв'язки з нашими міжнародними партнерами. В цьому місці я теж дуже хочу подякувати всій команді Gym Factory, яка працює над цим проєктом, проєктній менеджерці Євгенії Мелконян, продакшн-менеджеру Владові Білоненку, зокрема, які докладають багато зусиль, щоб це відбулося. Хочу теж в цьому місці саме стосовно цієї події подякувати Ів Гопкінс, яка є художньою керівницею театру Бельвю в Амстердамі, яка теж допомагала нам зав'язати контакти і дружбу, зокрема теж з Янніком. І тому я запрошую вас до сьогоднішньої події, до наступних подій Блекбоксу і до інших наших програм, щоб теж практикувати цей простір мистецтва як простір зустрічей і нових зв'язків. І тут передаю Яннікові слово і бажаю нам всім цікавого вечора, конструктивної розмови. Потім у нас буде сесія запитань-відповідей. Під час цієї сесії запитань-відповідей, якщо ви захочете поставити запитання, щось прокоментувати, проситиму вас підняти руку. Я підходитиму до вас з мікрофоном, щоб наш діалог був також почутий і записаний. Всім хорошого вечора.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, I'm Яннік. I'll try to talk slow so everything can be translated. Thank you for translating already. So yeah, I'm the co-artistic director of a company called 90s, and we're based in Amsterdam. And tonight I will kind of take you on a journey throughout the history of 90s. We've been existing for 13 years now. And we started very small, and actually we're still very small, but we kind of are scoping our horizons all over the world right now. And I'm very thankful for being able to be here, and hopefully this presentation will give you a little bit of inspiration or maybe even just a growing interest in any form of idea. I'm standing, but I will sit down in order to be able to do the presentation. And also I always like to have a bit of equality in the space that I'm, in this case, not performing, but performing in. And of course I have a Q&A at the end, but during the lecture, you're always free to ask a question, because I will go through a lot of things and maybe it's a little bit overwhelming. Maybe I have too many slides. So maybe I'll skip some. And meanwhile, don't be afraid to ask questions or stop me anywhere during this lecture. So yeah, I will focus on two things that is kind of key for my company. One is our collective way of working, and the other is being aware of our context and how context can shape the forms of our theater productions. Yeah. So my company is consisting out of 3 people. Me, Annemaike Mertens, she is a director. I'm mostly a performer, but also a writer, etc., but I'll get to that later. And Vevi van der Vliet. Vevi van der Vliet is our financial manager, I'd say. So yeah, the origins of 90s. 90s started in 2013. I graduated as an actor in 2010. And when I did, I immediately had a lot of work at the State Theater and a lot of big traditional companies. And after 3 years, I figured, hey, I'm not really happy with what I'm doing. And why I thought that was because I wasn't inviting any friends to see the show. Well, that's a bad sign. I just figured they wouldn't appreciate it. They would find it old-fashioned, outdated. I was doing all the classical plays. And then I thought, okay, this is not going well. I need to take a break and I need to figure out what makes me unhappy. And what made me mostly unhappy was not even just the fact that I couldn't invite my friends anymore. I mean, that's sad. But the most sad part was I couldn't tell the stories that were resonating with me. I couldn't tell the stories that were contemporary and part of the world I was living in. So when I took a break, which was hard because I graduated as an actor and finally had some work, and it was an awful time to graduate in with not so much work, but I did. And then after a year or so, kind of discovering a lot of entrepreneurship, I opened up a bar next to the Municipal Theater with some friends who did the Film Academy, and we just explored doing all kinds of events with music, live music nights, but also poetry nights and visual art exhibitions, etc. And we used the bar as a way to kind of lure people in. And say, hey, it's just nightlife. It's not art. It's not art. It's nightlife. So people kind of were into that, and we were able to seduce them to see some art. And after a while, I met Annemaike Mertens. Annemaike Mertens graduated as a director, but she already was a maker. She wrote a lot of stuff herself. She made a lot of material, theatrical material. And she told me, if you're not performing or playing or telling the stories you want to tell, then you probably first have to make the stories before you can tell them. And she was very right. After that moment, we started. Oh yeah, sorry, I don't have a preview of all the slides, so every now and then I'll dive back into it because I see where the slides are guiding me to. This is a quote by Donna Haraway. It matters what stories we tell to think other stories. It matters what stories make other worlds, what worlds make stories. Donna Haraway. And what she's saying is, in order to kind of have a more livable future, we have to adapt our stories. If we always try to tell the same stories, nothing will change, and especially our thoughts won't change. So that's an inspiration for 90s, and so we started out as a company that made an oath about the actual era, the 90s. because we wanted to perform for our own generation. In 2010s, it was pretty popular to kind of have a reminiscence of the 90s and kind of nostalgics around it. And we were wondering what made it nostalgic, but also we could kind of make a party out of it. So that was also our entrepreneurship with the bar. We thought, okay, if we can have an audience that would go to a party and we can make them pay for a party, then maybe we can also make a show about the 90s, and then all the people that go to the party pay for making the productions about the 90s. So that was our first attempt of entrepreneuring our art form. We didn't get any grants, no subsidies whatsoever. So everything was quite commercial in that kind of sense. And we just used my bar as a door to get people in. So we had all these crazy parties. So we had 400 people a night coming to the party, and 80 people could see the show. We had a capacity of 80 chairs. So with 400 people paying €5 at the door, we had a wage for making the production and performing it. Later on, we discovered, hey, okay, so this is working. We're positioning ourselves next to all the traditional and subsidized theater. But in order to have these people coming over, we also need to kind of go to all these people. So that's how we started making site-specific work. So the first one was close to my bar and in my bar, and the second one was a show about Bukowski, Charles Bukowski, an old beatnik generation writer, and we made this performance in a bunker. And this bunker was in the middle of Amsterdam. It already had its own youth and generation around it hanging, which we could use as an audience, but also we wanted to reach that audience. And yeah, so that's how kind of the adventure started, kind of roaming around the city, seeking for other places that already had a circle of audience with them. And so we started making pieces built for that context. It was our goal to also be, I don't know, expressing the voice of our generation. So we were always diving in what was, in those days, trendy, popular. I mean, we were young. We were also very vulnerable to what was popular, but we always tried to kind of deconstruct all the myths around all these different issues and different topics. And we wanted to, acknowledge that we were growing up as a generation born in the 80s, grown up in the 90s, that we could acknowledge present times, which is an ambiguous world. It's unpolished, and it doesn't resonate with all the classical, or most of the classical stories that only present one worldview, only present one perspective. So, in other words, we're living in a world where many truths would coexist. And we wanted to use theater as a way to represent that and trying to get a hold on to the world we're living in right now and navigate our way through it by, using all the stories of our times. A couple of years after Bukowski, we also made Noir. Noir is a dystopian. It was a film based on film noir, and we performed it in all kinds of alternative spaces, also like abandoned office buildings, like concrete, nothing there, and trying to kind of envision what the future will be like if technology would take on in the same pace as it is right now, and then very much focusing on the dystopian view of that. And so, slowly we transformed into a company that was more and more so working site-specifically. And what helped us making site-specific work was being able to also use the space around us to tell new stories, but mostly to find new audiences. Most of our generation, they didn't dare to go to the National Theater. They didn't dare to go into the red velvet chairs. So the only way to reach that kind of audience was to tell the stories in these different alternative, non-traditional, unconventional spaces. But we also found out that performing or creating in those spaces also affected our work and how we worked. So it also transformed the material we created. So, for instance, Untitled 2017, it was a show about metamodernism. Is there anyone known with the term metamodernism? No? Semi, I'll try to summarize it for a bit. So first you had modernism, and that was kind of going into the future. Burn everything behind us and go there. And that's what happened in the beginning of the 20th century, of course. And there were stories of single truths. It should be like this. No, it should be like that. Capitalism, fascism, etc., etc. After that, you had postmodernism, kind of acknowledging, hey, okay, so maybe there isn't a universal truth. Maybe it's all just relative to one another. And people started to deconstruct, and mostly in art, you see that a lot, where all kind of genres were mixed. But it also came to the point where everything became deconstructed for a bit. And people didn't know how to move on, because after deconstruction, you have nothing. So what's the next step? And there were a couple of cultural philosophers who said, well, maybe we're right now growing into a new era after 2008, after the financial crisis, where people are like, okay, maybe it's not true, but if we deconstruct everything, how can we move on? Maybe we need some more new sincerity. And that was the next movement, and that's metamodernism. As a metaphor, modernism was like a cow with a carrot hang in front of his head. Postmodernism was the cow being aware that of the construct, and the carrot was hanging in front of him and didn't move. And metamodernism could be captured in the metaphor of the cow acknowledging the carrot and acknowledging the construct, but moving anyway because maybe it will end up in a field of carrots. So yeah, that was kind of the topic of this piece, and we made this piece in all kinds of art galleries. And this is the first time where we also started working collectively with other artists, visual artists, musicians, etc., etc. And we used the galleries as a space to build new communities. It was based on a production of the 80s in New York called TV Party. And TV Party was an unscripted show that would host all kinds of artists. Also David Byrne and Talking Heads. I'm deliberately mentioning David Byrne, but you'll get there later. But also Basquiat and Blondie and so on and so on. And the idea of that show, that TV show back then was, this is a cocktail party that could also be a political party. And the only goal was building a community with all these different artists from every kind of style and every kind of genre, but getting them together anyway, despite all their differences, despite all their different worldviews, despite all their different perspectives on things. So we kind of made a contemporary take on that. And that was Untitled 2017, where we were able to build temporarily communities with the audiences of the galleries, but also with our own audiences. And the talk show, that was the form of our production. And it was even a talk show in the sense that we also streamed it live. So the audience live could see how we could construct the whole thing, see how we would play with the video and the cameras, while there was also a very democratic way of consuming the art through YouTube, where people didn't have to buy a ticket, but they could be part of it. They could also call in. And around this topic, we would have interviews with fictional characters played by ourselves, but also with artists connected to the galleries we were performing, and also with audience live and audience calling in. Yeah, we played this performance many different venues or galleries throughout Netherlands, but also in Sweden and Germany and Belgium. And so another example for how we use the context to shape our forms was a production called What If It Slows Us Down? What If It Slows Us Down was made on Oerol, and Oerol is a site-specific festival on the island of Terschelling. And there we made an audio walk where the environment actually could shape the content of the story we were telling. So slowly we became more and more interested in diving into all these, so to speak, localities in order to create a bigger awareness of what world we were in with each production. And What If It Slows Us Down was a fictional story about the far future, where we use speculative fiction, also inspired by Donna Haraway, in order to perceive a different way of seeing how also ecology changes, not only through climate change, but also just because of the cause of time. While working actively with being aware of all the context and how it can shape our work, I also kind of encountered the work of David Byrne. Does anybody know David Byrne? Nobody? David Byrne was the lead singer of the Talking Heads. He had a song called Psycho Killer. Maybe? Yes, okay, a couple of yes. But David Byrne is also a very amazing artist. He's also a visual artist, he's a conceptual artist, and he wrote this amazing book called How Music Works. And How Music Works is a work of him where he kind of researches the evolution of music in particular, but also art in general, where he found out that we as artists aren't as intrinsic as we think. We always are unconsciously and instinctively shaping our work to pre-existing formats. So, for instance, I think this is a very striking example. Before the technology of recording sound, we had a lot of jazz anywhere. And so people like Aretha Franklin or whatever, or even older musicians, they would go from jazz club to jazz club. They only had like a local audience because music wasn't shared anymore. But after the design of inventing recording of music, suddenly we had world stars. Suddenly you had an audience all over the world. And then these jazz clubs, they came to happen to be too small because there was a lot of audience. So they had to move to bigger venues and bigger venues and bigger venues until the point they had to perform in soccer stadiums and so on and so on. But then you had jazz music in soccer stadiums. It didn't work. It just didn't work. And slowly that whole music genre, it transformed into glam rock. Glam rock is very suitable for big soccer stadiums. And also now, he also predicted the coming of Billie Eilish in a sense, because when he was working on the book, Billie Eilish probably wasn't even born yet. He said, now we're all wearing personal audio close to our ears, so probably the next thing what would happen is have like ASMR kind of music, whispering and small hi-hats and beats. And there you go. Things like Billie Eilish stood up. So what he's trying to say is, as an artist, when you have a small piece of paper or notebook, while calling, you make a doodle. If you're told you will have an exhibition with a big white wall, you're gonna create something else. If you, like, unconsciously, instinctively. So you can use that if you become more aware of how the context kind of defines what you can create and what you make. And that became kind of a thread throughout our work in the past couple of years. So here's an example. We made a performance about Billy the Kid with musicians from the States, and it was about the post-truth era and how America kind of mythifized itself. And we used a big old barn, and we used the dramaturgy of a concert, very literally. And we explicitly didn't perform it in a grand hall stage, even though it would fit perfectly, even though the sound would even be better, with better equipment. We didn't decide to, because then a concert would also be already on conflicting with all the theater codes that are there. It also affects how we perceive art in a space like that. If you're in a theater, you're sitting still, you're quiet. You have all the unconscious theater codes that you're battling with. So that's why we decided not to perform it in the theater, but performing it in kind of DIY concert venues like big farm sheds. This is also a funny example. We wanted to make a show about Merkel, and we wanted to kind of have a face behind the politics of Angela Merkel. But we had this concept in our mind that we would make an opera and put her on a pedestal, because we thought the contrast was very interesting, because Angela Merkel doesn't like to be on a pedestal. She's not a very poppy kind of person. And then we thought, okay, what kind of space will we need for this? We have Angela Merkel, it needs to be like a beautiful opera, but we also want to see the face behind, so we also want to make behind the scene kind of vibe, so we had screens in the back. And then we figured, okay, so it needs to be a neutral space that can transform into different kind of worlds. And then we figured out, oh, we're actually describing a black box right now. So that was our moment where we figured, okay, now we do need a theater, because we need those qualities of a theater in it. So yeah, that's the story about the performance Angela Merkel. We were sitting behind those screens, and as performers, we could kind of meta talk about who we wanted to perform. I wanted to perform Europe. Benjamin wanted to perform Angela Merkel, and we would kind of give a context about where the political choices came from in that way. Oh yeah, this is also quite a good example of how the context was still used very aware. So Under Pressure was a show about my own generation. I don't know if it was happening here, but my generation in the Netherlands, there was a lot of burnouts, like a huge amount of burnouts. A generation that was told and promised, you can become whatever you want to become. The sky is the limit, do it all. Those were the 90s. And then in the 2010s, a lot of people from my generation, they were burned out because they couldn't find meaning again. They just figured, oh, I have to do it all. I have to become great in everything. All the options are there. I'm totally responsible for what I can become, hence the title, Under Pressure. And we used a metaphor for ourselves to express that topic, that issue. And the most literal metaphor we could use was, what if we put ourselves out there and put ourselves under pressure by having the concept of two young theater makers that can have the grand hall stage, the biggest theaters in Netherlands, and luckily all the biggest theaters in Netherlands were okay with us using it. And what if we could use only the material that you can find in those theaters? So the theater itself, it didn't become a fictional context. It was the literal context for the metaphor of our generation. So we kind of choked in our own ambitions and our self-told promises of you know, proving we were worthy for the grand hall stage. So even there, we used the theater itself as a site-specific location where we would take everything out of the closet that we could think of. We would let ourselves fly throughout the room. We had confetti, all the theatrical effects and visual effects that we could think of, trying to kind of go over it and making it the best performance ever we could ever imagine. We didn't succeed. Then slowly making a bridge to my another topic, and that's how we make collective work. And this one was called Memento Mori. We wanted to make a performance of our own immortality. And our own immortality, in order to do so, we would emphasize everything that is mortal. So we were in collaboration with this site-specific theater in the north of Holland. Beautiful dunes, forest. We could play anytime we wanted, so we figured, okay, maybe with sunset or using only natural lighting, only natural set design, and make a ritual in order to kind of make a reappreciation of everything that is mortal, everything that is that has permanence. And then COVID came, so we couldn't assemble anymore. We couldn't, the whole festival was canceled, everything was canceled. But during COVID, we were kind of, I don't know, even more ambitious to make a work about mortality while the media was full of numbers of people dying and in the hospital and whatever. I didn't see my parents for a while. And at some point my dad said, like, I don't want to live like this. I don't want this. Maybe it's also my choice to take a risk and be mortal and have the risk of dying. But for me, that's worth it. For me, that's more valuable than having this weird Zoom relationship that we were having. So that made us think, so how can we still make a performance about the importance of realizing we're all dying? And we thought, in a collective moment, we figured, that's interesting. Another person said, what if we do the opposite? Yeah, maybe we could do the opposite. Maybe we can immortalize ourselves by doing everything digitally. So there we go. Everything went through Zoom. We used green screens. We used all artificial colors. And we kind of made a, you know, a trip through immortality using Zoom. And that was only because we shared our process with our makers around us. We had a video maker, we had an IT guy who was very into connecting computers and so on and so on. We had a girl from Bolivia who was also a shaman, so she was very aware with the dramaturgy of all these rituals. We had a musician who happened to be the son of a preacher, so we could also have that perspective of mortality in it. And so our concept evolves collectively. Um,
Hey there, everyone.
Hello there! I'm so happy to see you all here.
Hello, everybody.
People are getting their own instructions here offline because they'll be watching the screens here, and they're gonna see what you guys are seeing.
I will give you a sneak peek of Christian as he is still playing here, our glorious musician.
Sorry that you cannot talk back to me, because if we would all talk together, it would be a mess.
Wow, it's cool to have people from all over the world right now. Thank you.
Yeah, so that was Memento Mori. That was kind of the start of our whole journey using digital media also for our performances. What I would like to say also is what I didn't mention. One of the starting points of 90s was also always having a shared here and now. For me, that's what I love most about theater, being in a space together. And that's also why I wanted to sit down while you were sitting down, is creating some mutuality. And I think that's exceptional for theater. So also diving into this medium using Zoom, we were kind of also countering all the streaming that was happening back then, because we wanted to establish a relationship with the audiences in order to not making it participatory, but only just being able to kind of acknowledging them and establishing a sense of a here and now, just like a concert where somebody would say, how are you, Lviv? And then everybody says, yay, and that's it. That's the only actual interaction, but the shared here and now is established from that point on. So using Zoom was making us able to do that. Yeah, so now for my next topic. Collaboration and collective creation. So yeah, being aware of the context is one thing, and the other one, which is very important to us and very, I don't know, a big signature for how we work, is our collective way of working. I want you to understand that collective working or being a collective doesn't mean everybody is doing the same thing. And collective working also doesn't mean there is no hierarchy. Even in a collective process, you can have hierarchy. Somebody who calls the final decisions, even though everybody can think about what is happening. or should happen. So I myself, I'm an actor. I write a lot of my own material, but during a process, I also write for others, and others would also write for me. And I would also be kind of a dramaturg, and I would also have things to say about the musical composition that is there. And when you start working more and more collectively, you also have more input into the actual outcome of the material you're making. What I'm trying to say is, when we started working with designers, and with designers I mean technological or digital designers, the way they had to program stuff was affecting in how we could think in form. So not only the context of an environment is affecting how we work or make our work, also with who we work. But in order to let that affect you, you have to have a certain sense of collectivity. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Otherwise, you're just executing as an actor, just like I was at the traditional National Theater. I was only said, okay, you walk here, you do it like this. Okay, no, that doesn't work. Stand up, do it while standing, etc., etc. And I felt more and more fed up with that. Our collective way of working started as an accident because we wanted to make the show about the 90s. I just assembled a couple of friends that I know that were cool, that could play cool music, that were acting cool. And then afterwards, we wanted to continue the company. And we said, okay, who wants to stay with us? And then everybody had different ambitions. So we thought, okay, maybe we should keep on working like this and asking collaborations for each project and establish temporarily collectives for each new production. We have a lot of different methods for working collectively. So one important thing for me is also having a lot of input, not only by the crew I'm working with, but also by audiences. So people working with us for the first time, they can be very nervous because after 1 or 2 weeks of just creating material, we show it to an audience. we let audience respond to it. We let them ask questions, and we have very, educational methods for that. So we always ask very politically maybe, what worked for you, or what did you see? So we try to stay out of judgments. So that's one thing. Another thing is, in working collectively, is when I have an idea, and I have an idea of a concept, and I have an idea of a form, I start assembling the collective. Maybe it's cool to work with a choreographer and have some dance. Maybe I should work with a visual designer and add that. Then obviously I already have the concept. I already have the idea and ambition to create a story about that. So how can you still work collectively while you're ahead of things? Our way to kind of intercept that is by having a research period of time. We call it a lab, and we take 2 weeks, and then we ask everybody to come with their inspirational material whatsoever, whether it's a song on Spotify or YouTube, or an article of the newspaper, or a movie, whatever made them associate with the topic, we ask them to bring it in. And we do the same. We put all the sources we've read and everything that we already had researched, we put it on the table. And we go through all the articles in the first week, and then in the second week, people start thinking of other stuff because of other showed stuff. And so we kind of create this giant mess of inspirational material without doing anything with it yet. So we always take it apart from our rehearsal period, our creation time, sometimes even half a year before that. So we can really be free in what what it makes us think about, and how we can have other perspectives on the topics. And that's also a very important thing for us, is working collectively. It's not just fun, it's also being able to resonate with one another and have material that emerges from that interaction with one another. But also, like I said, we want to make room for this multitude of worldviews that we have and acknowledge that. And the only way to do that is inviting all these different voices that can be there. So yeah, and then after the lab is done, we start creating. We have our creation moments. We, most of the time, no, it depends. I'm lying. I'm sorry. Sometimes we start creating from scratch, and we just build material. Movement, songs, text, dialogues, whatsoever. And we put them on a pile again, just like the inspirational material. We put them on Post-its, we put them on the wall. And meanwhile, you start thinking about a dramaturgical line in it, and we start shifting material. And then after 2 weeks of creation, we have our first run through, which still scares me to shit, you know? But it's okay, because everybody's there to kind of be with you, like you're bearing with me right now. Thank you for that. And sometimes we already have a dramaturgical line that we can test. So we have the dramaturgical line, we have a structure, and we say, okay, so here we do this, and here we do this, and here we need a conflict, and here we have this. And then we start creating within that structure, kind of filling in the gaps. So yeah, it depends. Sometimes we work from scratch. Sometimes we already have an outline of what we're gonna do. The result is we're never ready at the premiere. Never. Please, if we're ever premiering, don't go. Go there 2 days later, because while doing so, you have a lot of ping pong with one another. Oh, maybe this, oh, maybe that, oh, maybe we can change that. And we try to be fluid and agile and adapt to everything. And then most of the time, right before premiere, the day before the premiere, we have the final structure. And then you need to rehearse and get it into your body, and so on and so on. So that takes us a couple of days. So that's a reminder, never go to our premiere. No, they're fun. And we always try to keep the media out for the premiere. So the premiere is an actual premiere. We do have a lot of invites, but we only invite, and there they are, our friends. Exactly. So we have our friends, and we feel safe, and they know what we're trying to do, and we don't have to prove ourselves, and so on and so on. And then after 2 or 3 days, we start inviting media to have reviews. Our marketing people, they get stressed out because they never have a review or something to share at the premiere. So we always start slow with our audiences. But that's okay. I wouldn't want it in another way. Birds is an example of also using this collectivity in order to discover new languages. So first we only work with performers, like theatrical performers, and slowly we kind of expanded, working, collaborating with visual artists, but also choreographers. And it made us explore different languages. Like we do now, we speak other languages, but by working collectively, you're able to incorporate different languages at the same time. So this piece, Birds, it was about, how do you translate this to English? It was about being in a youth facility when you had bad parenting. I think that's a good way to describe it. And so it was a monologue, and it was very verbal, and it was very language-based. but by working together with the choreographer and having two dancers performing in it, we were able to have another emotional level underneath it. So, and dance and text is always very tricky, and that was also the case with this piece, I have to admit. But still, it makes our work more layered, because you can speak all these different languages at the same time, just as you incorporate visual arts or music. Movement is also something that can be translated into words. So slowly we became more and more masters in using different idioms, using different languages at the same time that could resonate with the audience on different levels. Yeah, and to be continued was a very exceptional collaboration, because this was a performance without a performer. Well, not totally. We had AI as a performer. It was made with I'm just gonna point them out, with two programmers, digital programmers who could write code. We had a musician, Philip Tim, classical musician who made a lot of electronic work. Maybe you know Moderat. I don't know if that. He's from Moderat, and so he uses all his analog sources in order to create digital expression. A visual designer, scenographer, my co-artistic partner. I don't know who that is. And we made this performance called To Be Continued, about how the whole digital world affects our perception of time. With all the apps and everything being kind of predicted when it comes, when it is delivered, how long it will take, etc., etc. How do we perceive time? And we figured, okay, maybe we should kind of use the experience itself in order to make a performance about it. So that was our choice, to not make a monologue or a performance like you know it about it, but have a digital experience. So it consisted out of a prologue, and that was getting to know our protagonist, an AI bot, which we really had to trick and form into a persona, which was maybe I can kind of divert for a second. So we had been using AI, and we wanted to have short replies. So we said, okay, reply in a maximum of 2 sentences. And it started creating these monologues, because we asked him to be interested in our human perception of time, acknowledging the fact that digital is just zeros and ones. It's solid, it's strict. There is no other perception of time within technology. But it just kept on replying very, very deliberate, elaborate. And so we said, okay, use 1 sentence. That's it. And it kept on doing it. And then at some point I figured, okay, how can I make this actor do what I want? Okay, I'm gonna prompt him, you are in a hurry. And it worked. Since then, it kept replying in short messages. So yeah, that's a little side tour. But yeah, for To Be Continued, we also used video mapping, and so it was one part was the Telegram chat, and the other part was where people would come together in this circular installation of LED panels, and it would give back all the answers that people would have given when the bot was asking about what is time to you, when was the last time you felt that time was stretched, etc., etc. And then slowly the bot tries to visualize how we perceive time as something more fluid and something that is not rational but very emotional. And then Untitled 2017 is an example, again, I already showed a picture of that, but of this collective way of working, because in this performance, we also had live audience calling in, like I mentioned. So not only with our own crew and performance, it became a collective piece, but we would also hear the voice of the audience themselves. So, yeah, I think we really love always breaking through the fourth wall, always in every way trying to have that shared here and now. Sometimes even with our audience, actually shaping what comes out. So we didn't have one night that was the same as the other. Sometimes very chaotic, but most of the time very valuable. The evolution of forms. So yeah, we had COVID, unfortunately, but because of COVID, we started experimenting with the digital media. Zoom was one thing and green screens was another. But it kind of made us think, what more languages can we use that are contemporary? And so I just go through a couple of productions that were formed because of this evolution of media that we could work with. One was 90s Lab, and 90s Lab was after Memema and Tamori, we had this green screen studio, we had invested in it a lot, and we thought, hey, this is cool, but we shouldn't be seeing it as just a solution to COVID. It's a new medium where we can still have a shared here and now, even though it's virtual, but we're still connected. How can we take that to a next level? And how can we turn that medium in something that is not only a solution for not being able to be together, but has its own qualities? So also referring to how context shapes our work, because of this new medium, we were able to have a different way of communicating with our audience. So very practical, everybody is at the same distance from its webcam, which means you have an infinite number of people that are sitting front row. You can be really close up, and you can do all these things that you're not able to in a theater. So a lot of people were kind of, I don't know, kicking us on the leg because we were exploring this digital form. Well, we weren't even trying to compete with analog theater. We still make a lot of analog theater, but it was just our curiosity for its own qualities, like having this intimacy, but also being able to have different perspectives by using cameras from different angles, and so on and so on. So after some time, we created 90s Lab, which was an artist residency where where we asked 8 different makers and groups to reside in our studio for at least a week. And then every Saturday night, we would have a live night where we would have an audience tuning in. And we created this together with 4 people of the company Snapchat. Snapchat is a social media probably also used here. And they created this video conferencing software where you were able to also design how everything looks. So it was like a Photoshop, but then with actual live audio feeds and video feeds, and you could design everything, which was very challenging because suddenly we didn't have a context anymore that we would have to relate to. We could shape the context whatever we wanted. So what we did was creating a digital world. We thought, okay, let's start very, very simple. Maybe build a theater, and what's even more important than a theater? A bar. So we made a virtual bar on the other side of the road. You could sit there, you could chat, you could encounter who was there, and you could even order pizza. So we had this franchise that was in multiple cities. So there was a menu, you could open up the menu, order a pizza wherever you were, and hang out with people that were also going to the show. We always deliberately started a little late so people could already mingle. And then after a while, the doors of the theater went open and people could get in. And here is a little bit of kind of reverse engineering, because we thought, okay, so if we are going for this shared here and now, how do we establish that? How do we establish that feeling? What is it in our physical world? And to me, it's all the fuzz, all the hassle around it to get to a theater, to get inside. So we thought, okay, let's use it. How can we make that virtual? And in those days, you already had like all these streaming links. You just order your ticket, you get a streaming link, you click on it, and you get in. And we thought, no, the whole hassle of having a ticket and standing in line, it all contributes to that feeling of being collectively there in the here and now. So we made this waiting line. These are mock-ups, except for that one. And you had to stand in line before you were able to show your ticket. What we created was, if the person in front of you didn't take a step to get closer, everybody was stuck. So every night we had people kind of yelling to each other, Peter, come on, move. Why are you getting a beer out of your fridge? Please, you have to move on. Nobody can enter. So people were standing in the way. So even though the amount of people going to the theater was infinite, theoretically, people didn't feel like it was infinite, but very finite. So people had to kind of take a step each time until you get to the ticket office. I would be in the ticket office, and we thought, okay, it would be really handy if people could just press a link and go in, so let's not do that. Let's make it more tricky. So we use QR codes. You buy a ticket, you get a QR code on your smartphone or in your email, and you just had to show it to your webcam. And I could scan it with my phone on my laptop, scanning the ticket, and I could open up the door, and I could, I don't know, give them some tips, tricks, or notice about what was about to happen. We created a little village. After a while, it kept growing and growing behind the scenes. So slowly, like in the beginning, we only had the theater. By the end, we had a whole village with, we had a discotheque, a literary bar. We had another bar. We had an open mic where people could go on stage and do a thing. We had a puzzle, we had an escape room, we had a fireplace where people could have intimate, and there we did limit the amount of people getting there. Only 8 people could sit there. And yeah, so we had all these goofy things to build a virtual world. We even had like a secret bar, so if you go in the street and you see this lid of the sewers, you could press on it and go into this secret bar. The fireplace. And then sometimes we had intimate concerts. So Madrat was working on a new album, and they could actually give like a demo of that new concert with audience, with 8 people of audience performing there, and have a conversation with them, which is something they cannot do because they're way too popular, so they have a lot of like awful fans. But now all of a sudden they could engage with the audience because it's, yeah, you know, it's still remote, and it was only 8 people sitting there. So this was the disco. You could make your own avatar dance and move. We had a DJ from Chicago who was playing. So we had all different time zones also close to each other. So also using internet as a space to dive into, we suddenly had a much bigger reach in audience. So sometimes we would perform very early in the morning to be able to perform for audiences in Indonesia, and the other way around, performing late at night to have our audience in the States, so on and so on. And now I wanted to show you, how are we on time? I'm totally slacking, sorry. Yeah, anyway, so every live night we had an intro, and that intro is also kind of a symbol for how we always try to rethink what is possible in a new space, within a new context. And I'm just gonna play that. Oh, do I need to translate this, or are we fine? Guess we're fine. That was French. Yeah. And English. Yeah. Yeah, so that was kind of a good example of how we always try to think in new ways and tell new stories. And this was part of this production itself, but it's also kind of the baseline of how we work and try to understand the world around us and explore playfully. So yeah, that was 90s Lab. We had, like I said, all different kind of makers, sometimes doing concerts, some made classical, traditional theater, puppet theater. We had all these different genres invited for our 90s Lab, and we made a very diverse scope of makers who could all explore the possibilities of this new medium. So this was a concert. I'm gonna, tell you briefly also about Untitled 2021. Where Untitled 2017 was a production in order to understand what it takes to build a community in those days. Untitled 2021 was the same, but 5 years later, in an era where we didn't feel connected to one another anymore because of COVID, but also because of the whole digital revolution that came on. And also the ecology, that story became more dominant. And that's how we came across with the work of ecologist, feminist Donna Haraway, who said, like I said before, in order to think other ways, we have to tell new stories. So Untitled 2021 was an attempt for us to counter the dominant way of storytelling, which is you have one protagonist, most of the time male and white, and he takes on a journey and conquers the people around him, and then he becomes a hero. And we thought, okay, if we keep on telling stories in that structure, it doesn't change our perception or our position towards the ecology around us. So that's how we came up with the idea to use the digital realm also as a system of equal things. So we created this digital database called All Things Earth, with everything in it: robots, rocks, plants, humans, animals, and so on, all equally. And we told a story where the human is not the protagonist anymore. So I tried to envision a story where people would take on the perspective of a rock, of a sea creature, of a plant, and so on, within a chronological structure of all history. Because of this, we also encountered another video artist with whom we tried to make this into a physical performance. We made that for the Grand Hall stage, which we really didn't like because it was super hard to reach our audience there. But we had to do it because of all the technical requirements we had. So it were 2 screens, one in front, one in the backdrop, LED screens, and we, through video mapping, we could create this holographic effect where I could literally dissolve into all the visuals and take a step back as the storyteller and not being visible by the end of the performance anymore. Yeah, to be continued, I already told you about that, but to give a sense of how that was, I'll show you a little video.
Start in 2 minutes. Time is like light.
Yes. And after this, we were kind of fed up with all the digital media and non-physicality. And we started to find a new form or find what's an urgent new form that we wanted to explore, and that was physicality. And so we came up with the idea of making an ode to the happenings of the 60s, and we made this performance Bring Back to Happening, where we could also focus on being able to coexist rather than being opposites to one another. And we used movement as a way of healing and doing that. So we made this ritual together with the audience, who were given assignments, and together with the two performers, they would build this inflatable sandcastle together and have reflection on themselves and all the traumas that were happening back there by just moving together, just as simple as that. And also finding collectivity, and yes, it is ridiculous. Also finding this feeling of equality by all dressing up in the same suit, like astronauts with the same goal, or like a soccer team with the same goal, or having something mutual next to each other. Yeah, I need to close down, because otherwise I'm gonna keep you here forever. I don't want to do that. But this is my last chapter. No, this is not my last chapter. Yes, it is my last chapter. And it's called Worlding and Pluriverses. And those are kind of, since I've encountered the work of Donna Haraway, they've been my mantra. In order to create a more livable future, we have to find new forms. We have to find new stories. And worlding is something that I can encourage every one of you in order to do so. And worlding is a word that Donna Haraway uses, where we would explore other ways of thinking, other perspectives, by using speculative fiction. Speculative fiction, another word for that will be science fiction, but it doesn't have to be science by itself. Like all the performances we made, I would love to see it as all acts of worlding, where we could get together in one fictional world and stay in that, even if it was just for one night or an evening, just to explore other perspectives and other ways of seeing. So therefore, to me, worlding is a very important thing in making my work, but also on a personal level, in order to be able to understand what is happening, and also to come up with possible ideas or possibilities by itself. And the pluriverse is also a very nice academic term I'd like to use, because we all know the term of a universe, and we all know the term of a multiverse. But where a multiverse have all different universes not interacting with each other, the pluriverse states just that. A multitude of universes that are all overlapping, all communicating with one another, and coexist. We are here together in this space, in this world, and by worlding, we can try to have other perspectives next to the dominant perspectives we have ourselves. Artificial by Nature is our most recent performance. It's a robot opera questioning the essence of being human. It stands right there. And it's based on the philosophy of Helmut Plessner. And we were kind of fed up with all the cultural, political, religious assumptions we have on what life is or what the human essence is. So we wanted to go beyond that. And Helmut Plessner was a philosopher who was a biologist, and he wanted to define life. He didn't get answers through biology, so he started philosophizing about it. And his most known term is being artificial by nature. He states that what makes human is our artificial ability to step out of ourselves and take a look at ourselves. We can take on a point of nowhere and see who we are. We have a body, but we also are a body. And already that difference in language defines our artificiality. We can reflect on each other, and the only thing we're trying to do is becoming who we are. So we're not who we are becoming who we are. That's kind of his base idea. And in order to do so, we use all these constructs that are not existing, like language, like culture, like religion, etc., etc., etc. They're all made up. This is a sad thing on one hand. The sad thing is we will never be our natural self. We will always have this reflective state. We will always try to become something, but we'll never achieve. We will never reach it. This is a sad thing. The beautiful thing about it, and to me very precious, is that it makes us able to every morning make another choice. We can break with all the patterns we have. We can break with all the perspectives and worldviews we have and become someone else. That is to say, with all the challenges that come with it, because it's hard to step out of the role we have or think of when I say I'm a father or I'm a lawyer or whatever. We always commit to the collective idea of what a father or politician or whatever has to be, but still we do have a choice. So yeah, and artificial by nature takes that mechanism very literal. We put ourselves in robot costumes. We distantiate ourselves from ourselves and trying to answer what makes us move, what makes us people do the things we do. And this whole opera are two robots doing an absurd thing and very important thing, trying to define us and also trying to answer that question. What do we get up out of bed for every morning, despite all cultural patterns we have? Yeah, that's a video. And right now we're performing this in all kinds of sandy sandscapes. We first performed it on the island of Terschelling, Oerol, which also became a kind of a red thread through our work. And now we performed it in China at the coast, and we're going to perform it in Jordan in the desert, and always trying to get the audience away from their daily environment and put them in the natural environment and kind of, you know, alienize ourselves from ourselves. And I think that's a very good thing, to every now and then alienate ourselves from ourselves. Yeah, that's Jordan. Yeah, this is just a closing quote, but you had enough quotes. Thank you for this. If you have any question, please ask. I'm very happy to answer that. And hopefully I've interested you.
А я тут є вже з мікрофоном і заохочую вас заголошуватися. Будь-якою там буде переклад для Янніка, як вам зручно, так і говорить.
Okay, a question about your old performance, maybe the most about the politician one, about the miracle. I'm interested about the public reaction on this, if there was some negative reaction, maybe because it's a really risk them, maybe.
Yeah, we did receive some negative reactions. I mean, it's quite something to also use the title Miracle and put her on a pedestal like that, and so on and so on. But on the other hand, what we were trying to do was what's most notable. Like, you can question all her political choices, of course, and you can also question her involvement with the CDU and her right-wing Christian politics. But on the other hand, she was the one who kind of took care by just keep it calm, and despite her own personal political beliefs or views, she made solutions for different crises. And that's kind of what we try to emphasize in the performance itself. So after the performance itself, we didn't have so many negative reactions on that, even though she is a very political figure. What we also kind of tried to highlight was her making a stand for, you know, all the gray in the middle, like in her political activities. She wasn't so right-winged per se. She wasn't so left-winged per se. She was more like a Sisyphus trying to keep the rock rolling in Germany. And she also admitted that as a politician, she wasn't going to a solution. She wasn't trying to reach a goal. She didn't think there was a utopian state possible. She was only trying to have most of the people being able to live in Germany. So yeah, after the people that saw the performance, not so much negativity. People that knew we were making something about Miracle, yes.
Thanks.
I want to try. No, I just want to ask which type of theater we can name it. I mean, in art we have I don't know, physical theater and etc. And I understand that some of them performance were like site-specific performance, but for example, this with Zoom. And how we can recognize it, I don't know, and maybe we don't need to like choose type of theater like this, or we need, or how you call it?
It's a very good question, and it's the biggest issue of our marketing people. I don't know what we call it, and it's very hard to kind of maintain a constant audience because of that. We lost a lot of audience because all of a sudden we created a concert, because all of a sudden we made a visual digital installation. But at the same time, we also reached a lot of new audiences because of choosing all these different forms. But how to call it, I don't know. We call ourselves a theater group, nothing more than that. Yeah, but if I find an answer, I will let you know, and also my marketing team.
Thank you.
Я тільки хочу сказати, раптом хтось соромиться, бо не розмовляє англійською, знаєте, що ви можете адресувати запитання українською і буде здійснено переклад. Так, про всяк випадок.
Дякую, що познайомили нас зі своїм середовищем. Ми теж працюємо над тим, аби сформулювати і сформувати свій незалежний театр. І мені просто цікаво, можливо, я це пропустив, але загалом От коли ми працюємо над тим, щоб вибудовувати якийсь свій театр, ми намагались розробити якусь філософію або намагались шукати тих, на кого ми орієнтуємось. Мені цікаво, чи в вашому театрі це є, і чи ви працюєте з цим. Загалом мені цікаво, хто є вашим глядачем. Яка це публіка? Дякую.
Yeah, we always have different types of audiences. So depending on the topic or the issue that we are working on, we have a different audience profile. So, for instance, when we made the show Under Pressure, it was specifically for my own generation, people in their 30s or late 20s that graduated and then still felt unfulfilled. So we also collaborated with a musician that was very popular among the same generation. And then, for instance, the Artificial by Nature, it has a much wider profile in age, but also in art. So Artificial by Nature was also trying to stay with the audience that is interested in visual arts, in installational arts, but we also collaborated with philosophy faculties at universities, doing workshops there, and also performing at universities. So for each production, we kind of dive into a different audience group, which is, also a pain in the ass, because you always lose some audience members that you found in one place and for one topic. But hey, we're human and we have different interests, and every day is another day. So yeah.
Так, ще запитання.
Oh, can I add something? It's in the beginning, we really had to work hard to maintain and grow our audience. And now after 13 years, we've come to the point where we kind of be confident about a base audience that we have. So it also took us years in order to grow a solid minimum amount of audience before we could really dive so specific into these different audience groups. But for the first few years specifically, we were mainly focusing on our generation, and our generation back then was easy to find in the more like nightlife circuit. So we also played in nightclubs, and we played in these breeding grounds and galleries that already had this generation assembling there.
I have a few questions. First is, you are in independent theater, right? And you earn money and your life with theater. You just have this theater and no other work.
Correct. But like I'm independent in that sense that in the Netherlands there is a lot of state and municipal funding also for independent smaller groups. So we used to be subsidized by the National Fund. We lost that a year ago because of politics. So there was a big cut for all the mid-careers. So a lot of colleagues, they were thrown out, including us. And we're still funded by the municipal fund. But now we have discovered a new workflow where we could do different co-productions with organizations around the globe that aren't so much affected by national politics. So for instance, I'm now going to make a new production, and I'm going to make that in 4 different countries, and every organization has their own space and technical equipment that they can give us or have us to use. So they don't even have to put money in it. They just give me a bed and a space and the equipment. So that's now a new way of producing and working. And then with the municipal funding from the Netherlands, I can earn my money. Yeah.
Great. Happy for you.
Yeah.
And another question, we saw this performance at the seaside. How the audience is situated there and how they hear the sound and all this technical stuff.
Yeah. So the let me draw it out. No. So you were the audience, and then we would perform in a big ellipse. And then we have the waterfront. So they were all on bleachers on one side, and we just had a PA. And then underneath our suits, we had wireless microphones and in-ear monitors, so we could still hear ourselves, which was awful because you were totally disconnected from the audience. So we didn't feel their reaction, we didn't feel their vibe. But luckily, the whole production was composed. Every single word was composed. So there wasn't even that much space either to perform it otherwise. Everything was in the grid of the music. So that was a relief, but yeah.
Challenging one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Запитання, побажання, рефлексії, так?
I have one more question about this collective creation of the place. Who are these people who give you the ideas, songs, and all the stuff? You told that you have 2 weeks, or more or less 2 weeks, when people come with ideas to you. Who are these people?
Artists in general. So they're either composers or dancers or choreographers or visual artists. And just along the way, we get to meet more and more people. And through people we work with, we get to meet even more people. And now, because of all our international collaborations, we even get to meet local artists from outside of the Netherlands. So that we can perform now outside of the Netherlands is not only a way for presenting our work more, it's also for us a way to, have more minds and skill sets to collaborate with.
And you make a call on the internet?
No, we
are
never.
Going to make new play, or how does it work?
I think in the past 13 years we've made an open call for only 3 times or something like that, and the rest is all kind of based on. So we do have a rule for each production. We have to have at least one unknown collaboration, one person we don't know. And things move every production, but there are also some artists that we repeatedly work with for a while, for a couple of years, and they go out again or they come back. But we don't set up an open call. We have this idea in our minds. We think of a form that we want to explore, and then we ask around about people and we research them. And then at some point we have a short list and we just call them and say, hey, do you want to work with me? Yeah.
And you gather together, or they send you, or you meet every evening, or what kind of co-production?
During creation?
During these 2 weeks of
during
brainstorming, so to say.
Sometimes we just have a space for 2 weeks and we just use office hours. And sometimes we also do a collective residency. Somewhere we go into a cabin and stay there for a week, eat together, drink together, and read and watch and listen together. Yeah. So it depends from production to production. Sometimes the crew is too unknown and too new, so then we just keep it to the office hours, so we're not too invasive or intrusive at once. But if we're okay with most of them, then sometimes we just go into a residency and stay there. Yeah.
Great, very interesting.
Подумайте, я зараз поставлю одне запитання від себе, і в нас залишиться час на ще одне запитання, якщо воно буде. Тому поміркуйте зараз. So that I want to address the question that I'm very, very curious about. In Untitled 2021, you said you wanted to bring perspective of non-humans, and you would speak in their name, yes, from their perspective. But how did you work with it and with this ethical question then when you speak from the stone perspective and bring it as a narrator? It's still the human perspective on how the rock can, I don't know, I can't even feel, I can't even use words think or feel or express, because this is something we cannot have even knowledge how this non-humans, different non-humans, can have their perspectives. What were your thoughts, maybe discussions inside the team on this issue?
Very good point. Very, very good point. The whole production from the start was already called a failing attempt. So we already acknowledged that we were never being able to fully incorporate the perception of something non-human, because we are human. So the whole process where we would have discussions about it was more in how do we acknowledge that in the material itself, and when do we acknowledge that. So we had whole discussions about when I should go off stage in the 1.5 hour long performance, or should I even start at the middle of the stage or already be off stage, or so those were kind of the problems we encountered with this thing. And yeah, it all became like a collective concession. And so we also wanted to emphasize that we were aware of this failure, so we started with me in the middle, front stage, starting this narration as a person, and then you don't have to do anything. You just walk on stage and you're the protagonist, whatever story you're gonna tell. So the whole show was also kind of a battle for, get that out of the way or try to make people think other ways. Yeah.
Thank you. And it's time for the last question.
First of all, thank you very much. You're a great storyteller. It was such an inspiring presentation. And I have a question. Have you ever been interested, you as an artist and your company as a group, in working with some controversial themes for Dutch society, or probably some blind spots in Dutch history, or probably some traumas, history traumas? Have you ever been, as an artist, have you ever been feeling responsible for that? Or this is not a question important for your generation of artists in Netherlands?
Yeah, we always try to find a certain diversity within the collective we're going to work with, within the temporarily crew we're going to work with. But most of my ideas aren't political explicit. So, and that's just the person who I am. Otherwise, I might have been a great politician, but I'm not. I'm really not. But there's also an artistic responsibility that I feel, and that is never trying in a shared space and in a room where we are exploring different possibilities, never trying to live in an answer, but always trying to cope with a question. So in that sense, that also sometimes kind of filters out people to work with, people who are already too kind of defined and too activistic, because then it's very hard to open up the conversation and explore that. So in those terms, yes, we sometimes filter that out, but we're not afraid to, like for instance, with the performance Angela Merkel, we also collaborated with a very right-winged composer and poetry writer. So we don't go out of the way of that, but we want to make sure that we're able to, I don't know, break open the conversation and being allowed to have other perspectives while being in the same room. For me, that was back then very important. Is that an answer to your question?
Yes, of course.
Yes. Yeah. And what I really hate, on the other hand, is preaching for my own choir. Like that's very hard in the Netherlands. Like it's very left-winged. I'm also left-winged, but hey, but it's very hard to reach other audiences. And what I always love most is being in conversation with all these different perspectives. So that's also a reason why we do a lot of site-specific work in order to also break free from the standard profile of theater audience.
Нік, thank you. І дякую всім, хто сьогодні були присутні. До зустрічі.